Hello, and thank you for having us here. My name is Andy Creath. I'm the president and founder of Green Roofs of Colorado, a green roof design, installation, and maintenance company. And Jen Bousselot is going to be here as well, and we're going to be talking about green roof policy in Denver, Colorado, USA. This is a really exciting period of time in 2017 when the city of Denver was really having some environmental issues and still is, but was really looking for a new policy to help push the city forward. And slide. And at this point, we had a grassroots political push started by Brandon Rietheimer for change. And this happened, which created one of the first green roof policies in North America. And you might be asking, why green roofs? Really, it was because there's a multitude of public and private benefits for green roofs. And what they are is they really affect air, water, carbon, and biophilia. And if you're not familiar with biophilia is the innate human instinct to connect with nature. So really all it got down to is people really wanted to interact with nature more and feel more green. And so this policy started in 2017. Again, we presented at the Cities Alive conference for the Green Roofs for Healthy Cities, which was in September of 2018, to really share this information that Jen, myself, and Brandon Rietheimer, the author and organizer of the Denver Green Roof Ordinance, had in play. Slide. So Brandon came to be, he noticed these problems in Denver's environmental issues. We had the third worst urban heat island effect. We had the 11th worst air quality in the United States. We had major stormwater issues flowing into our rivers in the middle of the city. So Brandon, inspired by Bernie Sanders, who is a Vermont senator in the US Senate, really wanted to start a grassroots effort and bring people into this process. He modeled the green roof policy on a Toronto code that was already existing, but it took a lot of work. He was able to use that code, but he adjusted it for the different climate in Denver by enlisting 60 plus volunteers, collecting over 8,000 signatures to get this on the ballot. And this is someone, Brandon had no experience with green roofs. But again, it goes back to the process that green roofs can be a solution and an aid in helping many environmental issues throughout the city. Slide. So the policy process were hearings, meetings, council meetings, and public commentary periods. And so Brandon got into this. And again, being someone with no experience in green roofs, needed to bring in other people to kind of help him get this process through. And Jen and I were asked to come in as mainly technical expertise to help battle the city, and not battle, but explain to the city and explain to the developers, industry, other people why green roofs were a good fit for the city. And when that occurred, we were able to kind of downplay some of the misinformation that was being passed by opponents of the ordinance. And what was amazing was the Denver Green Roof Initiative, the ordinance 300 was accepted to the ballot and was placed on the ballot for November of 2017 on the election. Next. Again, this ordinance was based on Toronto's policy, but it added a big caveat. It added existing buildings at expansion and re-roofing of the building. Slide. And this is it. This is what it was basically. It was, you have a large building, 25,000 square feet or more, and you had a certain percentage of roof space that needed to be covered. And as the buildings got larger, up to, as big as the buildings came, the percentage of green roof got significantly more. Slide. Over the course of time and over the course of months in 2017, while passing on all this information, amazingly to some of us, and not to the people who really believed in it, but the ordinance was passed in a political landslide, despite a complete lack of support among the elected leaders at the time in the city of Denver, and a well-funded opposition that raised over $250,000 US dollars to fight the policy. And so this unique citizen-led approach to green policy is something that many lessons can be learned from, and many policy advocates can learn from in the future. Again, and it goes back to what green roofs are. They offer a multitude of benefits throughout the space, affecting air, water, and then that feeling of being surrounded by nature into a city. And once this passed in 2017, the long road ahead was really shaping it to what the future policy would be and how it would affect the city. And Jen is going to talk. Jen Bousselot, who's following me, a professor at Colorado State University, is going to be talking about what happened after this passed, after the initial joy of passing this. The real work was really starting to begin. And we had the same opponents afterwards really trying to change the policy within. So Jen's going to speak with that. So thank you for having us. And here's Jen Bousselot.
Thank you, Andy. It's such a delight to share this story with all of you. Shalom, welcome. I am a professor of horticulture in the Department of Horticulture and Landscape Architecture at Colorado State University. And my specialty is green roof research, which I've been working in for about 20 years. And as Andy mentioned, we were advisors, technical advisors to the grassroots ordinance authors. And so it was quite a process. Our work was not done upon passage. Actually, it was just really beginning. So once that passed, our city of Denver had about 6 weeks in order to mobilize and initiate a process. One of our primary problems with the ordinance is it was written by citizens rather than by policymakers. And so we had trouble getting that code to fit into the existing city code. So faced with that, the city of Denver ended up putting together a task force. So it was a 20-member task force. Of course, Andy and I, along with Brandon, and believe it or not, actually several folks that led the opposition to the ordinance were all included. So were additional local stakeholders, such as prominent real estate representatives, community organizations, environmental groups, and of course, representatives of the city. It was a very unique process trying to rewrite the essence of an ordinance that had passed by our political process into the code. So the task force of 20 members, we had a deadline of June. And if you remember, it was a January initiation date. So in about 5 months, we had 9 meetings. They were very tense meetings with very different views. One of the most interesting things about this process had to do with how Brandon, the leader of the proponent, and the leader of the opposition ended up by the end really being sort of unified in their ideals. So the primary opposition really had to do with extra cost. Surprise, surprise, in the US, that is a major concern, especially amongst our development community. They didn't necessarily see the benefits, they only saw the costs of green roofs. And so after we had an opportunity to really educate the task force on the benefits of green roofs and their potential applications, believe it or not, the opposition was actually quite interested in the possibilities, especially when we talked about what an opportunity there was to use green roofs as amenity spaces for developers. So by the end of our task force process in June of 2018, we ended up forwarding a recommendation to City Council. And so essentially the bottom line essence of what we forwarded was it provides more options to achieve stated goals. So we essentially rewrote the code. When the task force was formed, we had 3 options. We could advise to not implement the ordinance, which of course Andy and I and Brandon were not interested in. We could rewrite the code or with additional options, or we could end up passing as is except that the way the code was written and the fact it didn't fit into our city's code would have made for almost 100% exemptions. So of course we took the middle option. We wanted to ensure that as cities, or as our city expanded, so we got new buildings, and as our existing building inventory turned over in terms of roofing and expansion, that we had an opportunity to improve the environmental conditions of our environment. So it ended up turning into work like this. So the first one I want to talk about is new buildings. So in our analysis in the task force, we found out very quickly as a group that it does not cost a lot of additional money to reinforce the building and provide access for green roof spaces. And so we actually had fewer options in order to accommodate the end goals of the ordinance. And that includes, of course, green roof as an option or green space on the ground, and there's specific requirements for that. We can also have developers pay for offsite green if that's not a possibility. We also looked on the energy side, since environmental benefit was the primary motivator of this ordinance. So we debated on what would allow for enough sort of effort or input into environmental benefits. We also had solar or energy efficiency programs, and we had additionally certification. These certification options were really for affordable housing buildings. That was essentially the primary group we were aiming for to allow that sort of lower level. Let me tell you, to date, almost all of the new buildings have gone for either green and energy efficiency, or so that first large column that's aqua colored, or the second one, solar energy efficiency. So very few like to incorporate just one option. They actually like to have a little bit of diversity. And then we had the category of existing buildings. This was the most controversial part of the ordinance in general. There was a big fight that, well, not every building can accommodate green roofs. And Andy and I kept pointing out there are lots of very lightweight green roof options, but we heard their points. So there are additional options for existing buildings. So at roof replacement, they have to have a cool roof. In fact, cool roofs are required across our city now. Black membranes, unless they're covered up, are not an option. So covered up with high reflective material over top. So these options were green roof or green space, pay for offsite green, which very few have done, solar application certification, and the energy program. Now, most of the existing buildings to date have done the energy program. However, there are groups within our city that are working to increase the need for energy efficiency within our building inventory. And so pretty soon, this is not going to be a viable option for most of our developers and building owners. They're going to have to look at post-occupancy certifications, which, if you're not familiar, it's not a major part of it, but there's all kinds of environmental building certifications out there, including our LEED certification program, either adding solar or adding green on their spaces. So it's going to be predominantly the green roof, green on site, or solar that is selected in the future. So since Israel and the US share some similar struggles related to water, fresh water, I wanted to mention a little side project that ended up occurring with our task force in 2018, and that has to do with water. So our water authority here in our metro area is called Denver Water, And so they were actually on the task force because they were concerned about potable water use. So we ended up doing an analysis using data from my doctoral research, and we made some assumptions that we had about 1,000 acres of new green roofs. So in hectares, divide that by 2.5. And we assumed 95% being very drought tolerant, so succulents or natives, and about 5% turf and ag. The great thing is that the analysis resulted in only a 1.15% increase at peak season in potable water use. We have laws in our state that prevent us from capturing stormwater, so that's why this was a major element. So just to wrap up, the status of the Green Building Ordinance, of course, the timeline for designing, permitting, and building buildings in general take a long time. And so in order to show major impact, it's going to be many years more before we see a lot of additional projects. But here's a few of the statistics. 2019, we had 53 new projects, since it didn't actually get into the code until April of that year. So 18 new, 35 existing. In 2020, we had 99 new projects, 57 new, and 42 existing. That slowed down mostly due to the global pandemic. And then in 2021, about the same number of total projects with the same ratio. So I show a couple of pictures here of projects that I'm actually a sub-consultant on right now. And these are electing to do green roofs. They actually don't have to install green roofs in order to accommodate the Green Building Ordinance. But here in Denver, now that we've done a lot of education, it has become a part of the conversation even more. So thank you all for inviting us to your fantastic conference. And we want to invite the next speaker on. Thank you.